Oji Rose, and today we're going to be talking about incentives to problem solve, and this is featured in The Map is Indestructible, Book 2 of The Truism, the Rational. And the argument of this piece is that problem preventative measures have a disadvantage to problem solving. If I were to train you at a gym to not get sick, this is going to be more existentially unconvincing, if you will, that I did anything for you versus the doctor that treats a sickness that you have. If you come in and never get sick, you never see the sickness you don't get. But if you come to a doctor and he treats you from the sickness you have, then that functions as evidence that the doctor actually did something. Whereas with perhaps the gym trainer, you could abstractly know that going to the gym is good for you, but you can never know for certain that you, in particular, going to the gym is a reason why you don't get sick. Maybe you're just lucky, etc., etc., etc. And so it becomes much more difficult to feel, say, authoritative in saying people should exercise or people should eat well, whereas if somebody is sick, it seems much easier to say you should go to a doctor. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this, but the point is that there is a certain existential, subjective bias or obstacle in the way of really engaging in problem prevention versus problem solving. It's probably much easier also to get a consensus, to get a group of people to agree to launch political action, to solve a problem versus prevent a problem. It's much easier to convince people to help you regulate the banks after a financial crisis versus, say, do something about the market before a financial crisis. And, of course, this is extremely dire if we're dealing with problems that once they emerge, it's too late, or the consequences are just very, very severe. So this bias favoring, and also this has impacts in relationships. You know, if there's a couple that's going through drama and they come out of the drama, it can be easier to think, oh, that couple can overcome hardship, or they can, compromise or learn to get along, than, say, the couple that never fights. Maybe the couple that never fights does so because they've done a lot of inner work or gone through a lot of, inner work, philosophy, to precisely not to fight. And yet it might be easier to think that that couple is shallow or they've never had any real hardship, when really maybe they just did all of the work inside to prevent that drama from emerging. Likewise, if you never see, say, someone in a relationship solve problems, maybe they just prevent problems, but if you never see the solving of problems for sure, there can be senses, are they, pulling their weight, are they doing what they're supposed to do, and so on and so forth. So this all leads to, it's very difficult for humans not to prioritize what they can observe, like the empirical, if you will, which all of this would suggest why we might be more prone for a data society, an empirical society, a society of things that we can observe and see for ourselves. And this doesn't mean data is bad, nor are we even saying that problem solving is bad, because, if a problem arises, you need to solve it. And in fact, you could use an emphasis on problem prevention to avoid solving a problem. So that has to be kept in mind. But the point is that if we're going to err, if we're going to overfit, if we're going to make mistakes, it's unfortunately probably going to be on the side of problem solving versus problem prevention. Also, data, it might be quite difficult to gather data about a successful problem prevention project or initiative, whereas it's probably far easier to gather data on a problem-solving initiative, because there's the problem and did it solve or not. It's not even clear how you would gather data about an initiative that prevented a problem, because even if the data shows, oh, this school, everyone made A's, you could always posit, well, maybe they just had good genes, maybe it's a privileged area. You could always posit that there was no problem and that the initiative didn't do anything because there were variables, outside the system. But if you had a school where everyone was making C's, then you had a different program and everyone started making B's, it would be a lot easier to gather data that the initiative did something, that it was a good initiative. When, of course, it could still be the case that it was some other variable, something unforeseen. But it would be easier to believe that the initiative did something, maybe even when we should not. So there's a certain bias that, a natural bias. It's not, say, people, conspire for this bias. It just arises from the just experience of reality itself. There's a certain bias, it seems, for problem solving over problem prevented. Furthermore, another thing the paper talks on is vividness. And the idea of vividness that could be a problem is that if you're in a house where everything's falling apart a broken pipe probably doesn't stand out. But if you're in a house where everything works and a pipe breaks, it probably really stands out. It's probably very vivid to you. And the point is that a house that was completely falling apart and would have, really in a very real sense be worse than a house where everything was together, the data might actually, or just our attention, or the thing we even care to gather data about, might really just be kind of oriented by what's vivid to us in a working system. So if a system works, the thing that breaks is really vivid to us and tends to be what we focus on and gather data about, which is not inherently bad. But what it does mean is that we have to be careful to solve the problem that's vivid to us in a way that breaks the entire house. Also too, it might be kind of funny, but in a weird way, if everything in a house is broke, it might be easier to not have a single problem bother you because you're just used to everything being broke. Whereas if a pipe breaks, that might really bother you because it's more vivid to you. And the vivid stands out. It's what we tend to look at. It's what we tend to see. And it would be very easy to spend our lives just problem solving what's vivid to us and never engaging in problem prevention, because problem prevention is probably not vivid. One, because it's invisible, you don't really see it. And two, problem solution tends to have a vividness on its side. Problem prevention tends to be very systematic, very holistic, very entire, whereas problem solving tends to be very linear, X variable. It's like a point, really. And so the issue that happens is if there's something about vividness that biases us, it probably will distract us from the whole system. And in distracting us from the whole system that doesn't stand out, that's more like background, this may really get in the way of our capacity to problem prevent versus problem solve. So vividness has to be taken seriously. And really vividness could, in a functioning society or a functioning system, constantly kind of keep people in a problem-solving mode, always dealing with those problems that stand out, and they stop doing the work needed to maintain problem prevention. And so then the whole system could start to decline and fail because people are too focused on the problem solving at the expense of problem prevention. Not necessarily, but if we're aware that we have to problem solve in a manner that does not ruin mechanisms of problem prevention, then we might be careless, and this could lead to all sorts of trouble. Furthermore, since this book, The Map is Indestructible, is all about ideology and ideology preservation, what problems stand out to us as problems tend to be organized and set by our maps and ideology. And so the problems we spend all our time solving could be relative to how we view the world. And we may, in doing that, take that as evidence that our ideology is correct, when really what we define as a problem may not even be a problem, but we see it as one because of our ideology. And as a result, our ideology has us engage in an endless life of problem solving, and we never move to a place of problem preventing. We never move and that would be a threat to human dignity, ultimately. And so the paper will go on from there. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com, Twitter, Anchor, Instagram, so on and so forth. You can find the paper on Substack and Medium, and you can find our books on Amazon. And thank you so much for your time.